Hey everybody, it's Greg Miliatis from Streamline, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about ProLaw reports, specifically ProLaw default reports, and 6 common problems that they have with them, and there's some easy fixes for it. So you may have already run into some of these common problems. It could be formatting issues, blank pages, uneven columns, mixed fonts, super large headers and footers. There's a number of different common problems that I've seen with ProLaw default SSRS reports. And I'm going to cover those and, again, some easy fixes for them. But first, why should you care about this? Well, first of all, you actually kind of want to look professional when you're presenting reports or statements, especially to clients, because that's sort of the one of the faces, the public faces of your firm. So you want to look professional, and you also want to look professional when you're presenting reports internally at the firm. You don't want things to look sloppy. So that brings me to my next point. You don't want things to look sloppy in ProLaw. ProLaw costs a lot of money, I understand that, and it should not look kind of slipshod. To paraphrase an angry ProLaw client from way back in the day, you paid for a fine French pastry and shouldn't feel like you're getting a Twinkie. So that's another reason why we should care about these little reports and how they're formatted and fixing them. And lastly, extra paper and printing things, whether it's extraneous room in the header or the footer or blank pages every other page in the report, it creates more trees and it's a waste of paper. And whether you are a lumberjack or a tree hugger, we all love trees. Okay, so what are the common problems with ProLaw default SSRS reports? So one problem that I alluded to is maybe there's no header on the report. So it doesn't even say, for example, what the report is. Is it a matters report, a transactions report, events, contacts? If there's no header on the report, you have no idea what the report is, and you've got to actually look at the data on the report and skim through it to try to figure out what the heck it is. So that's one problem. Some of the reports don't have any headers on them. A similar problem that I see on a lot of ProLaw default reports is either the header or the footer section is too big. So it might take up, between the header and the footer, maybe like a third of the total page height, which is way too much. It's overkill, it's unnecessary, and again, more trees die because of that. Another related issue is with overuse of paper is blank pages printing on every other page of the report. This is a common issue. I see this in a lot of default ProLaw reports, and a very common thing, easy to fix, but it's common and frustrating. Another problem that I've seen with ProLaw reports, default reports, is sometimes the reports have multiple font faces in them, sometimes Arial, sometimes Times New Roman, and it just looks kind of sloppy and inconsistent generally. A fifth problem that I see is that columns aren't aligned on the report. And this is especially true in statement bodies where you've got columns of dollar values totaling, say, from the fees section, the expenses section, the totals, like in the summary. And if those don't line up, it just looks a little sloppy and can be kind of confusing for clients. Similarly, if report sections don't have the same widths, it just looks a little slipshod. Things can be moved to the left, to the right. The widths can be different, and again, it just looks kind of sloppy and it doesn't present the best professional face of the firm, especially on statement formats. So let's find out how to make a Twinkie into a fine French pastry. Let's go through, take a look at what the problems actually look like in practice and some real quick fixes for them. All right, so what I've got here is just a matters. You can see it's a matters report, and I just ran a plain old listing report, no groupings or anything. And I just wanted to show you a couple issues with this report. One is there's no report title on the report, so I have to actually kind of sort of look in here and try to figure out what this actually is if I handed this out to a partner. So a report header is actually pretty useful. That's one problem. And again, this is just a default report. I didn't tweak this or anything, make any changes to it. This is just how it comes out of ProLaw, kind of sloppy. The other issue with this report is both the header and the footer on the report are pretty large. If I go page to page, I can see that the header and footer are pretty large, and they're kind of just taking up extra blank space unnecessarily. So what I did here is I opened up made a copy of the default listing report, got into design mode, and I can see that the header here is kind of large, there's nothing in it. And similarly, the footer is kind of large, and again, nothing in there, no page numbers, anything. So the first thing I'm going to fix is I'm going to put the report name, the title of the report, in the header. So we're going to put a text box here in the header, and going to just move it up to the top left there, do some resizing. I'll add the report title, or the report name in the expression, and then do some little formatting. Squish this down a little bit so it's not so tall. And now what we're going to do is we're going to smush down both the header and footer so you can get a little more space, usable space on the report. I'll leave a little bit of blank space here before the column headers begin. And the footer, I'll just add a quick field for the page. So for the page number, again, we're just going to insert a text box here. I'm going to move it around, position it, and size it how I want it. Make it a little bit larger than what I think I need. And then I'm going to write in an expression here for the page numbering. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tell it to print page, the actual word page, and then the current page number. So page 1 of 3, for example, is what we're going to print here. And we're just stringing these things together. Put that in the expression, and then smush this down. The other thing I notice as I'm in here is I can see that if I click on this, the font is defaulting to Arial for both the fields in the header and footer, which is fine, but everything else in the body looks like it's Times New Roman. If I click in this tablix here, I can see it's Times New Roman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that both of these fields are Times New Roman. And let's test it. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. There's less blank space at the top and at the bottom, and it looks like underneath this is just probably an inch or so of margin, probably the same on the top, but there's far less space at the top here, and I made sure the fonts all are the same. So next what I did is I just ran this default inquiry report, and I can see a couple of other problems here. Again, the header and footer are super huge. There's no report name on it. And then if I page between each page, I can see every other page here, every even numbered page is blank. So trees are dying, and that's no fun. So we can fix that real quickly. Okay, so again, I just went into design mode. I can see this big giant header here with nothing in it, this big giant footer here with nothing in it. I'm going to squash, actually I'm going to remove that just for now. And then I've also got this big giant, if I click here I can see it's in the body. We don't need all this extraneous space down there in the body. I'll remove that, and I'll just, for now I'm going to remove the page header too. Now the problem with the extra pages, printing every other page, it's basically that the body, if I click here in this blank area on the outside of the tablix, I can see that I'm in the body here. The body size is wider than the report, the printable area in the report. And I can see that because if I go back here, I'm clicking, going to report properties, it's 8.5 by 11. We've got left and right margins of 1/2 inch, so that means there's 10 inches printable area, even though the body is 10.1 something inches. So the 10.1 something inches, this 0.1 something, has to flow to the following page. So kind of silly. So the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to look first and see that the tablix is not more than 10 inches. Okay, so it's under 10 inches, that's fine. And now I can change the size of the body so it's 10 inches. Save that, and then let's preview it. Okay, so here it is with no header, no footer, and if I page through, I can see there aren't any blank pages. This extra blank space at the bottom is likely because the next matter that it's printing won't fit in the area above the margin. But again, we don't have any blank spaces pages. It went from 12 pages to 4 pages, so pretty cool. The forest is happy. Here what we're looking at are a couple of other problems. Again, we've got this mixed font face here. This looks like Arial. Everything else looks like it's Times New Roman. And then the width of these different sections is not quite the same. So, and it even looks like this side here is a little more than on this side. So there's some alignment issues that we've got. So let's go into design mode and see what we've got and some fixes for them. All right, so here I'm in the actual design mode. I made a copy of this default statement body in ProLaw just so I could go into design mode. And now I can look and see how it's laid out. I can see actually here these columns actually all these columns don't go to the far right of the page. These do though, but there's a bunch of blank space on the left there. Not really sure why that is. And I can see also that these subreports don't go to the far right of the page either. Same with this little tablix here in its fields. So all the alignments are kind of a little weird, and I can't see in any of these subreports how wide they are. They might be wider than the tablix above it, and they might be more narrow. So you end up getting, especially with subreports, since it's hard to see the widths, you can end up getting on statement bodies in particular a lot of weird alignment and width issues for the sections in the report, and it ends up again looking kind of sloppy. So the way to fix those, actually probably what I would do here is for these, bump those over to the right side, and sort of same thing here, just bump that over. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just moving everything over so that it's congruent with the right side. These subreports, I'm going to do the same thing there. I'm just going to widen it. There's no harm in widening a subreport, but that way they're going to potentially align to the right as well. So that's one way to do it. And again, this is typically my preference is not to use subreports, because I just find unless you're using the exact same subreport across many different parent reports, it just becomes more cumbersome to do the design in the subreports and manage them and remember what they look like. My preference is to use a bunch of different tablixes like this one, this expenses tablix, on the same body, because then you can see, say for example like this fees section, this expenses section, you can look and you can see that, for example, this amount column, it's all the same width. Same with like this rate and this price column or the units column. It's all the same width. So you can get things aligned much more easily if you've got tablixes on the report instead of subreports. Okay, so let's save that and see what we get. So what I found was that these top and bottom margins and left and right margins were a little weird. They should really be the same all around. So I'm going to make them an even ½ inch all around just for consistency. So we've got 8.5 inches wide minus a ½ inch on either side gives us 7.5 inches of usable space. So I'm going to change the body width to that 7.5 inches. And we've got this little extra space here. And the easiest way, there really shouldn't be any blank space on the left there. That doesn't really make any sense. There's no reason for it. So the easiest way to move everything over is to just click somewhere in the body and then Control A on your keyboard. It'll select all the elements, all the objects on the body, and then you can use your arrow key to just arrow over to the left. So it moves everything over to the left. That looks fine. And now what we want to do is we want to widen these fields to 7.5 inches. These little tablixes, I'm going to just manually move them over. Now these tablixes, I want to keep the column widths for these amounts, the prices, the hours. So I'm not going to adjust those, and I'm not going to adjust the widths of the entire tablix because they have different numbers of columns in them. If I adjusted the entire width of the tablix, these fields would get sort of prorates their widths, and so the widths of this column and this column are going to end up being different. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to change the widths of these columns or the other ones. I'm just going to change the width of the narrative column and just drag it, drag it like that to the end of the page, to the right side. Same thing here, I'll select the narrative or somewhere in there and I'll take the narrative column and drag that over. The subreport, I'm just going to drag that over as well. These subreports, same thing. And then in this tablix, I will just move it over. And finally, get rid of this blank space at the bottom. There's no reason for that. Okay, so now let's see what we have. All right, so here's what we've got. We've got the original that is the default ProLaw SSRS report, and this is the one that I tweaked. So again, I changed the widths of it and the margins are the same on all sides. Everything lines up nice and tidy here. There's a couple little tweaks here. There's some column width issues here that are causing these fields to wrap. And then I noticed that I forgot to change back the font on the header. But other than that, it looks much better. This looks a lot tidier, a little less sloppy here, and we could actually change this subreport. This is one of the subreports on it, so that it actually shows prints in the center of the page if we wanted it, or we could have it stretch over to the far right here. So a couple quick fixes there, and hope that's helpful. Okay, so that was a real quick whirlwind tour of some of the common problems I see on ProLaw default reports and some fixes for those. If you have any questions, need help, give me a call. There's my number, there's my email, and I'm sure I can help you with that.